Tak, to już 30 lat tutaj mieszkamy w wschodniej Anglii, a przyjechaliśmy tylko na 2-3 lata z Londynu. Dawno temu, w 1940 roku, zostałem wywieziony z matką i z siostrą do Rosji, właściwie do Kazachstanu, koło Semipalatyńska. A ojciec był aresztowany przed tym i był w łagrze. A potem też matka została aresztowana, bo myśmy chcieli uciekać do Polski z powrotem. I ja śledztwo byłem w takim domie przez 2 lata. Jak wyszła amnestia dla Polaków, to ojca zwolnili, matkę. I ojciec pracował w takiej delegaturze jakiś czas, ale potem został aresztowany drugi raz i po paru miesiącach skazany na opuszczenie Związku Sowieckiego. W przeciągu musiał wyjechać za 12 godzin z tej miejscowości. I wyjechał do Persji, do Iranu, a myśmy pojechali za nim. Jakiś czas byliśmy w Persji, a potem ja wstąpiłem do junaków, do wojska polskiego. I byłem w Palestynie, w Egipcie, a potem w Libanie. Z Libanu przyjechaliśmy do Anglii. Miałem 17 lat wtedy i jedyną rzeczą, co mogłem robić, to być zwykłym robotnikiem, co zbytnio mi się to nie podobało, więc udało mi się wstąpić do marynarki handlowej. Najpierw to był taki polski statek, właściwie płynął pod banderą liberyjską, a później na 2 angielskich byłem też. Po pewnym czasie zobaczyłem, że to też do niczego nie prowadzi właściwie. I na ostatnim rejsie oszczędziłem sobie trochę pieniędzy, także mogłem kupić taki stary motocykl, który właściwie uwraził się w tym samym roku, co ja. To nie było takie stare jeszcze wtedy. Potem udało mi się dostać takie stypendium na 1 rok do szkoły artystycznej. Miałem był taki rysunek klub czarno-biały, który robiłem podczas rejsów albo jak podstawił gdzieś w portach. I jak pokazałem te rysunki tamtym profesorom, co przyjmowali, co im się spodobało i powiedzieli, skończysz ten kurs, którym miał trwać 3 lata za rok. Poznałem tę moją żonę, która studiowała rzeźbę. I jakiś czas potem po ślubie mieszkaliśmy w Londynie, ale ponieważ było trudno bardzo, prawda, ciężko być malarzem i, prawda, i pracować i tak dalej, i małe dzieci, to chcieliśmy wyjechać z Londynu gdzieś na wieś, gdzie są tańsze domy i życie jest tańsze, prawda? A w Brukseli jest więcej miejsca i więcej swobody. Zamieniliśmy właściwie to nasze mieszkanie w Londynie na ten dom tutaj. I jakby ktoś powiedział wtedy, że mamy 30 lat, to mieszkam, to bym nie uwierzył w to. Najwięcej, może 5 lat wytrzymam na tej angielskiej Syberii i potem wrócimy z powrotem do Londynu. No ale jakoś tak lata biegły i w dalszym ciągu to jesteśmy. Takie sygnałki. To jest właśnie moja żona, Angielka, urodzona nad morzem, a ja jestem z Lwowa, jak większość marynarzy, z głębi lądu.
Czy pamiętasz, gdzie pierwszy raz spotkaliśmy się? To było chyba na korytarzu.
Nie. Spotkaliśmy się na dziedzińcu pracowni w szkole w Chelsea. Poszliśmy na małą herbatkę.
Tak, jak teraz.
Właśnie, tak jak teraz. Tylko nie w Chelsea.
A ja już zapomniałem o tym.
Mamy 3 synów. Najmłodszy urodził się właśnie w tym domu. I jest marynarzem tak samo, jak ja. Najstarszy urodził się w Londynie i teraz pracuje jako wykładowca w Poznaniu. A średni syn mieszka w Bostonie i jest elektrykiem.
Mamo, zobacz, coś tutaj znalazłem, to niespodzianka.
Co to jest? O, wielkie nieba.
No, to jest przecież nasz dom. Pokazali go we włoskim magazynie.
To jest Florian, mój najmłodszy syn, który jest marynarzem i przyjechał teraz właśnie na urlop. Za 2 tygodnie wraca z powrotem na morze. Jest już marynarzem od 10 lat.
Mom, that's something I want to show you. Just follow me a minute.
Kuhn to jest fenomenalna osobistość, bo przede wszystkim to jest odludek, a jednocześnie bardzo ciekawy człowiek, dlatego że on się prawie nigdy nie uśmiecha, a jednocześnie jego obrazy są wyjątkowo wesołe. Polacy jako artyści to są strasznie zarozumiali według mnie i starają się być wielkimi światowymi artystami, tworzyć wielkoświatową sztukę, pełno filozofii i pełno wody. A on powiedział, ja stawiam na małą sztukę. Sztuka, która mnie cieszy. I okazuje się, że tysiące Anglików cieszy się sztuką Kuhna. Jego obrazy są strasznie odważne, a czasem są bardzo subtelne. Tutaj właśnie jest portret jak gdyby mnie, to znaczy malowany w mojej pracowni, kiedy maluję portret Kuhna. Na stalugach to jest portret Kuhna. A Kuhn maluje mnie, jego malującego. Także sami Państwo widzicie, że jako portrecista do Royal Academy się nie nadawałby. Ale zobaczcie, jaki wspaniały obraz, jaki subtelny w kolorycie, jaki pełen umiaru, pełen wspaniałej konstrukcji. W ogóle jego obrazy są pełne świadomości tego, co robi. To jest fachowy malarz, który całe życie poświęcił sztuce. Ci polscy malarze, którzy są w kolekcjach zachodnich, to jest polski kapitał kulturalny i z tego względu Kuhn jest bardzo wartościowy dla Polski. On będzie tak samo znany jak Chagall, może nawet więcej, dlatego że był bardzo płodny i bardzo dużo jego sprzedaliśmy obrazów. Kuhna nie kupuje byle kto, dlatego że dla byle kogo on jest za prosty. Kuhna kupują malarze, Kuhna kupują rzeźbiarze, Kuhna kupują muzycy, ci, którzy się na nim mogą poznać. O to chodzi.
Artystów tworzących tutaj jest dużo. Paru jest niezwykłych. Pan Andrzej Kuhn i jego twórczość zdecydowanie należą do grupy bardzo specjalnej, bardzo wybitnej. Miałam przyjemność spotkać się z malarstwem pana Kuhna już jakiś czas temu. Wydaje mi się, że ten dzisiejszy wernisaż, otworzenie wystawy w Covent Garden w Królewskiej Operze w Londynie przyczyni się w bardzo znaczącym sposób do tego, by był poznany, by został rozpoznany i uzyskał jeszcze szersze uznanie niż ma w tej chwili. Dlaczego? Wydaje mi się, że jego malarstwo po prostu znakomicie pasuje do tego wnętrza, bardzo prestiżowego, pełnego muzyki i spokoju równocześnie, a takie jest malarstwo pana Kuhna.
W obrazach Andrzeja Kuhna można odnaleźć pełnię życia. Jest tam zawarty także swego rodzaju idealizm. Świat, który nie istnieje, którego artysta ciągle poszukuje. Przypuszczam, że jest to ten sam świat, którego wszyscy szukamy. W tym świecie wszędzie można znaleźć zwierzęta, rozglądające się po różnych zakamarkach. Jest tam na przykład oswojony lew. Pamiętam obraz, który jakiś czas temu wywarł na mnie ogromne wrażenie. Było tam dwóch starych rybaków. Wiosłowali w łodzi i próbowali wyłowić z morza tonący księżyc, bo ziemi groziła ciemność. To szczególny, wzruszający sposób wyrażania myśli. Kolory w tych obrazach są bardzo delikatne, rozproszone, ale mają niekiedy intensywność klejnotów. Dziś, kiedy żyjemy w czasach, kiedy we współczesnej sztuce jest wiele brutalności, twórczość Kuhna sprowadza nas na powrót w krainę romantyki. To trochę jak świat prerafaelitów, zmierzający w kierunku średniowiecza. Za tym wszystkim kryje się jakiś sen, marzenie.
The pre-Raphaelites, but going beyond that, going into the medievalism. There's a dream behind it, isn't there?
Dla mnie te obrazy są wyjątkowo polskie. Każdy może w nich odnaleźć swoją bajkę. Do każdego można ułożyć własny wiersz, własne opowiadanie. Bardzo lubię w nich to, że przypominają mi mój rodzinny dom. Są w nich moje drzewa, moje rzeki, moje zabawne małe domki. Tak właśnie odbieram te obrazy.
Myślałem właśnie o tym samym. Marzenia z dzieciństwa. One nie są dziecinne. To marzenia dziecka, które się urzeczywistniają.
koniec XIX wieku ta miejscowość to była taka miejscowość letniskowa, nawet dobrze znana. Tu przyjeżdżali ludzie z całej Anglii na wakacje. Ładne drzewa rosły wtedy i kwiaty. Morze wtedy było bardzo blisko, 200 metrów tutaj i to było morze. Od tego czasu morze odeszło. Miejscowość całkiem podupadła. Już nikt nie przyjeżdża tutaj teraz na wakacje. I przed wojną przeszło to w ręce rolników. Wycięli wszystkie drzewa i zasadzili kapustę, kalafiory i tak dalej. Jak myśmy tu przyjechali, to jeszcze cały ogród, to była jedna kapusta, pole kapusty, aż do drzwi. Ja wtedy zasadziłem może jakieś 100 różnych drzew, prawda? Które teraz już są duże. Wyrosły i teraz taki ładna oaza zielona się zrobiła. Atlantyda, która ukazuje się na niektórych obrazach, prawda, to jest taka symboliczna, może to reprezentuje też zaginiony świat przedwojennej Polski z Lwowem i okolicą, tam gdzie, prawda, się urodziłem. I to wszystko zaginęło, prawda, bezpowrotnie, jak Atlantyda. Księżyc, a słońce to jest po to, prawda, żeby zapełnić pustkę i na płótnie, i może też i w prawdziwym świecie. Coś by tam brakowało, jakby nie było tego księżyca na obrazie, prawda? I tak samo w życiu, jak jest coś, księżyc to, nie wiem, może jakiś taki reprezentuje jakiegoś takiego ducha opiekuńczego, anioła stróża, a słońce to może być na przykład dusza domu.
Hello again, welcome to Folio. Our film tonight is a real feast for the senses. Anyone who's had the luck to visit or even seen pictures of the famous garden that belonged to the Impressionist Claude Monet at Giverny in Normandy will know what wonders can be created when the gardener has both an artist's eye and green fingers. That limpid water garden and blur of colour so familiar on Monet's canvases are there to smell and touch. Well, we have a painter here in England who's created a garden of delights that reflects the character and feeling of his work. The artist is Andrzej Kuhn, not an English name. He was born in Poland, but this country has been his home since the early 50s. His childhood was traumatic, for during World War II, his family were deported when Germany and Russia divided Poland between them. He spent time in the Middle East, joined the Merchant Navy, and eventually fetched up at Chelsea School of Art in London, quite an eventful background for his development. Well, this spring, an important exhibition of his work is to be held at the Assembly Rooms in Norwich, 5th to 9th of May, if you want to make a note. So we felt it was timely to take a look at this very unusual artist and his very individual style. His paintings are largely concerned with fairy tales and folklore, naive and strongly reminiscent of traditional Polish folk carvings. His own carvings, too, are fascinating. In fact, everything Andrzej Kuhn turns his hand to becomes something rich and strange. He's an extraordinarily shy man, not given to assessing his own talents when we filmed him, so we turned to the people who admire his work for a perspective on it. In his natural habitat in Freeston Shaw, Lincolnshire, he seems both at one with, and yet at the same time alone in that uncompromising landscape. Alison Brown takes up the story.
Concealed behind a circle of tall trees in the otherwise inhospitable landscape of Freeston Shaw is the home and studio of Andrzej Kuhn. Enter that magic circle and you are transported to his private world, composed from the same imaginative palette as his paintings. Both are as compelling as they are unexpected. His home is not his castle, but it's a kind of palace in a once-upon-a-time world where fairy tales and folklore are brought to life. Mystical princesses inhabit the garden, while through the looking glass, new characters are created. Conventional transport would be out of keeping in this enchanted place, so Kuhn has a solution for that too. He bought the motorbike and constructed the sidecar. Now he and his wife Diana can travel the flatlands of Lincolnshire in style. No artist, however isolated, is immune from the pressures of making a living. Kuhn has exhibited widely, but has had a particular connection with the Centaur Gallery in London. As one might expect, it's not a conventional gallery. No bare white walls at the Centaur. Instead, an assortment of paintings and sculpture of all styles compete for attention. It's the kind of place where a browse could take a week. The owner of this idiosyncratic gallery is a painter and a Pole. Their association spans 25 years, though Jan Velichko recalls his first meeting with Kuhn.
He came to my gallery in about 1960 or maybe 1961. I would say 1960, the end of it. And I thought he was magnificent. And since then, we became friends. He had 3 exhibitions every few years with us in Portobello Road. Portobello Gallery, Centaur Gallery was very famous. We had marvelous, lots of very interesting exhibitions, and his exhibitions were one of them.
Jan Velichko has promoted the work of many artists over the years, but none so consistently as Kuhn. So what was it about Kuhn's work that warranted this constancy?
I thought he was one of the most original people who painted. I mean, there are plenty of Polish painters everywhere, but they are rather harking towards, you know, École de Paris, you know, the very fashionable painting. But he consciously went to his roots, because his grandfather was a Polish carver. He was a primitive carver, and obviously he had a great empathy to that.
Like his paintings, these carvings by Kuhn are deceptively simple. And this apparent simplicity means he's often placed in the category of the naive or primitive artist, a term used to describe the art of working people with no art education, who therefore use none of the conventions of composition or perspective adopted by the prevailing culture. The naive painter usually comes to art in middle age or later and draws on personal experience. Kuhn does not fit this definition. His father was a civil servant, and Kuhn himself studied at Chelsea School of Art when he was only 23. However, if you look at traditional Polish folk carvings, there are similarities. And perhaps it's his retention of Polish traditions in the style of his work that label him a naive artist in Western eyes. Jan Velichko has no doubt that such a label is inaccurate when applied to Kuhn.
Oh, I don't think he's primitive at all. He's a very sophisticated artist who happens to admire most probably the most vital streak of Polish art, which is this tremendous, brave attack art with a dash of innocence, which is Polish folk art.
It's a little surprising that Polish traditions should still be so evident in Kuhn's work, since most of his adult life has been spent in Britain. Perhaps one of the reasons he so persistently clung to his roots is that when he was only 10 years old, he and his family were deported at the outbreak of war. His homeland completely lost its identity when Germany and Russia partitioned Poland between them. The following years were unhappy ones for Kuhn and his family.
Well, when the war started, at the beginning, first my father was arrested, and sent to the labor camp. And then my mother and sister, they come collect us and put us on a train, a goods train. And after about 4 or 5 weeks, the train stopped and the doors opened. It was in the middle of the very flat country. It's not a building inside. There was several ox cars waiting for us to take us from the station to the place where we're supposed to spend the rest of our lives, I think. that's not the end of the story, because when they said to us in sort of collective farm near the Chinese border, and the people, they start frightening my mother, oh, you won't survive the winter. The winter is so hard here, you know, that you won't survive the winter. So my mother had the idea that she could escape back to Poland, you see. And she took us and we set off in the beginning of autumn. But of course, it's about 3,000 miles or something like that to travel. So they caught us up. And my mother was sent for, she had 10 years for this in the labor camp. And me and my sister went to sort of a place for orphans, or sort of children, abandoned children. And we nearly, well, that was really dreadful time, because it was, they didn't feed us properly, you know, and it was very cold.
Political settlement brought release for Kuhn, but his development as an artist was delayed further by a long term in the Merchant Navy. It was not until 1953 that art school became a possibility. Even then, reviews like this might never have happened. To go to art school, you first have to find one.
Well, all I had was few black and white drawings. And there was a chance of getting for Polish young people that still had a chance to get some grants. It was the last year, and somebody suggested, well, why not try to get in art school? I was working in the factory at that time. And I didn't even know where is the art school. I live in South London, so I set off on a motorbike and I went to Battersea Polytechnic. Of course, they haven't got art school there. So they sent me to Chelsea School of Art.
And you stayed there for how long?
For 3 years.
It would be difficult to imagine a place of more sharp contrast to London than Freeston Shore, and it's tempting to speculate that the isolation of this tip of Lincolnshire echoes the landscape of Poland. Not so. The move came about through much more pragmatic circumstances, as Diana, also a student at Chelsea, explained.
Andrew was in the library one day, and we lived near Crystal Palace, and he saw in Dalton's Weekly this house advertised, and he came up to have a look at it, and then I came too, and we thought, well, we could afford it, and maybe it would be nice to move, and so we did.
And you obviously liked it, because you've been here a long time.
Yes, we've been here 24 years now.
So when we came here, the front garden was a cabbage field, and also cabbages on the back. And then the very first autumn I planted some trees. So about 200 trees I planted over the years.
Including little ones?
Yes. And then I slowly start making outside sculptures from cementos, one in front of the house, and then another one, and a few wooden ones.
Privacy at Atlantis, as Kuhn's home is now known, is closely guarded, not only by the dog Genghis. The installation of watchful figures continues. The impulse to create one's own environment is felt by most people, but in Kuhn's case you feel there's more to it than that.
Something there, you know, it sort of comforts you, you know, it's like a guarding spirit sitting in the garden.
The guardian angel keeps a passive eye on Kuhn's secret garden, but his secret has to be shared with the outside world. For a personal view of who shares it and why his work intrigues, Jan Velichko.
I find his work fascinating because it is so different, and although deceptively simple, they are most sophisticated. I mean, he is collected by most sophisticated painters, by most sophisticated writers. He is not collected by bourgeois kind of a collector who collects signatures. They are the things of love. You know, they have a quality of innocence, like a song of the lark. You know, it's just, it's not a flamingo. It is a wonderful quality of straightforward music. I think they are wonderful.
Every artist enjoys praise, and Andrzej's had his share over the years. But approval does not always reach the pocket. Although they live modestly, Andrzej can look back on some lean years. Public taste is subject to change, and Kuhn's distinctive work has had to suffer the slings and arrows of precarious fashion.
I think the true painter needn't worry about that, and as long as he can paint without starving. I mean, let's face it, Van Gogh never sold a picture, and he's a great. The greatness doesn't depend on money. But I'll tell you one thing, we sold his pictures to most interesting, most sophisticated people. Consequently, they happen not to have, lots of money, but his prices gradually rise, and he spread his work all over the place. So I'm sure there are people who come, buy for their children, buy for their wives, buy for their, one Kuhn is not enough. I'm a painter, I have more pictures than I have a hair on my head, but I still bought 7 Kuhns because I like it. I mean, our gallery is dedicated not to fashion, but to art. The art which is love. If you don't love it, better not buy it.
Two people who loved and bought are Philip and Mary Belton. A cereal farmer from Sibsey near Boston, he now has a total of 11 paintings by Kuhn. The collection started with the purchase of a small painting from a local exhibition, but they too found that one was not enough.
I left it about a year, I think, and then I decided to go and see the artist himself, and I saw him, and I purchased another small one called the Fisherman's Lunch. And I have a half-brother who's 20 years younger than me and highly educated and an art student at the time, and he ridiculed the first painting, but after he saw the second, he became extremely interested. And he said, "Take me to see this fella," so I took him. And I couldn't believe it. He just spent all the money he had on him, and some of mine.
Knowing and liking the artist made a difference, and in a small way the collection could be regarded as a sort of patronage. Certainly the paintings were not bought with any idea of investment. Philip and Mary bought the pictures because they liked them. They make no claims to expertise.
I wouldn't say it was good art. I don't know what is good art. I mean, if you bring a fellow to me and he says this is good art, I shall say, well, it may be good art to you, but it's not necessarily to me. And I'm not saying that they are good art. I'm just saying I enjoy living with them. They're room decoration. I don't know, Andrzej, very pleased if I said that, but that's what they are.
Well, talking of room decoration, you haven't got much wall space left. Does this mean the collection is now complete?
Well, I couldn't move.
Despite occasional disagreements about where the paintings are placed, the Kuhn collection is regarded as good company. Mary Belton.
I think they are. They're sort of amusing and, well, they brighten a gloomy day.
It's sly sense of humor. I don't know whether it's conscious or subconscious, but he's one of the very, very few artists who can't be humorous in oil. It's almost impossible, but he manages, because he goes around the world like a figure from his paintings, you know. He hardly smiles, but he is full of humor. And if you know him for a long time, then you understand it.
We went to buy chicken somewhere, and actually we bought this one chicken, and in the bottom of the carton box was Old Exchange Mart. And I just glanced at the advert. It says Newfoundland Dory for sale. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So I rang up this person. And you went to see it a long way somewhere. What was it?
Dorset.
In Dorset, yes. I remember arriving there, and actually I don't know if he expected me. He said he expected next week.
Said he'd have been expecting.
But anyway, we
week.
drive in this sort of narrow alleyway. I stopped the car. I said, "Oh, he must be there, you know." And I went. There was nobody there, only this boat in the garden. And I look at this boat and say, I'm going away. No, I don't want it. And I sat in a car and I said, well, may as well have a look at this. And all of a sudden the owner appeared. I think he's been waiting, he's pretending that, you know, it's... Anyway, and then we bought this boat.
The sea has long been important to Andrzej Kuhn, though now it offers not employment but subject matter. Voyages down the estuary are voyages of discovery. The sea, a blank canvas.
Each time you go to sea, you may have some idea of painting, you know.
The fact that he is not in the middle of the commercial market, it only delays his success. But his uniqueness will go through.
Andrzej Kuhn has been working for 30 years and has sold more than 1,000 paintings. He knows because he's kept count. And it's encouraging that interested, intrepid people find their way to Atlantis. He used to paint every day. Now he has so many pictures he's tried to slow down. More than once, he's been tempted to stop.
Oh yes, many times, yes, but so if we stay in London, probably I could be tempted to have another job, you know, being here. It's nothing. So I cut myself off, you know, somehow, physically too, you know, so that's why I carry on probably, you know, one of the reasons.